Monterey Public Library welcomes you today. Mr. Burnham, I'm pleased to share, was born and raised in England, but claims to be a quarter American. His paternal grandfather, for whom he is named, was a much-traveled Californian mining engineer. Howard took honors in modern history at University College and the University of Durham, England, and in 1972 was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, London. He has worked as an educator, museum curator, and actor in the UK and USA. Since quasi-retiring to Pacific Grove, he has regularly appeared with Pack Rep in Carmel. Mr. Burnham, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I actually was elected to the Royal Society of Arts in 1972. I'm not over 100 years old, but bless you for that. It makes me feel very mature and very wise. Anyway, as many of you know, last year I started doing a series of 6 programs to mark the 250th birthday of Monterey, and I managed to do Gaspard de Portola and Captain Hippolyte Bouchard, and even John C. Fremont. And then, of course, the horrid COVID came along. But now, happily, through the miracle of Zoom, I can do it virtually into your homes. And in a moment, we're going to see a recording of my Doc Ed Ricketts program. So I now hand it over back to Francesca, who hopefully will project the program. Hello. I'd like to share with you the 5th of the 6 characterizations that I've devised to celebrate Monterey's 250th birthday. This time it's a characterization of Doc Ed Ricketts of Cannery Row fame. So, turn myself into Doc Ed Ricketts, who was not follically challenged like I am, so on goes my Ricketts wig, sort of. On the Doc's hat, it's better. And rather than just look at my talking head, we go to share screen, and I bring up my Ricketts slides. I hope that's it. And now, on your imaginary forces work, if you'd be so kind, please imagine it is the fall of 1947, and we are at Doc's lab on Cannery Row, where he is just getting rid of a rather unwelcome visitor. So here is Go with the Tide, Ed Ricketts, 1947. And you can tell your octopus of a wife that a cuttlefish has more charm. Now skedaddle out of here. Confound John Steinbeck. May his liver rot and his socks be permanently damp. Ever since that confounded novel of his, that Cannery Row, that hymn to the stink, the grating noise, the quality of light, the tone, the habit, the nostalgia, the dream. Oh yes, John, very poetic. Ever since that confounded novel of his came out, I have become the legitimate target of every Steinbeck-obsessed literary enthusiast who is anxious to meet the real Doc in the flesh. Hold it there, buddy. I'll just get the wife to come up so I can take a Kodak moment of you two together. It'll be a formaldehyde moment if this carries on. I've got to do something before I do something desperate, like first-degree premeditated murder of a Steinbeck enthusiast. So I have here composed a long letter to the editor of the Monterey Herald in the hope that he will print it, and then people will leave me in peace and go and camp outside Steinbeck's place and plague him instead. I reckon I need a drink of whiskey. I tell you,
pious pose of the teetotaler is merely an obscene cover of various disgusting personal habits. So, to my letter. To the editor of the Monterey Herald, Sir, I trust you will do me the kindness to print the following in order that the great American public may know all about me vicariously, and in future leave me in peace. So here I give to the world the life, liver, and opinions of Edward Flanders Rob Ricketts. My friends, in order to deal with life, with beautiful, baleful, bountiful, bastard life, and learn something from it, learn the first rule of life is live it. Don't toy with it. Live it to the full. I first began this living thing May 14, 1897 in Chicago. Son of that great American icon, the successful salesman. From birth, I was a child of rare charm and intelligence. I always had plenty to say, and I began speaking very young indeed. I was articulating full sentences before I was a year old. Oh yes, a precocious little runt was I. Now, at the age of 6, I was ruined for any ordinary life when an uncle who should have known better presented me with some natural history curios and some old zoology textbooks. Here I saw for the first time those magical but incorrect words, coral insects. So began my lifelong fascination with little marine creatures. School days. At elementary school, mirabile dictu, my teachers liked me, despite the fact that when they were too wrong about things, I would politely and kindly correct them.
Excuse me, I think you'll find that the correct answer is actually...
Yes, I must have been a little charmer to get away with that. At the same time, despite my bookishness and the fact that I had absolutely no interest whatsoever in sports or athletics, the other kids liked me too. However, I was no milksop. I toughened myself up with morning cold plunges in the old leaky hip bath, and by sleeping rough in our yard in all weathers, including snow, much to the alarm of my parents. Incidentally, my people were good, indulgent, tolerant folk. Once, father caught me playing with a bunch of street kids in a city block that had been flooded with filthy rainwater. I didn't see him, and he let me continue with my mudlarking. He simply went back home to prepare mother for the coming shock. When I got home, to ward off the pending pneumonia, there were quinine tablets, hot towels, dry pajamas, warm blankets, and no penalties, not even a scolding. I reckon my own tolerance for everything, except perhaps intruding literary tourists, derives from my people. In 1907, the family moved to South Dakota for a year. Here I was stimulated by the change of flora and fauna, and I decided that I definitely wanted to pursue a life dedicated to biology. However, my initial encounter with academe at the Illinois State University in 1916 was pure disenchantment. I dropped out and went tramping on a bummel to Texas and New Mexico, doing odd jobs and experiencing new flora and fauna. I enjoyed myself. But then Kaiser Bill, having sunk the Lusitania and offered the places I was visiting, Texas and New Mexico, back to old Mexico in the Zimmerman telegram, we were at war with Germany. For the duration of the Great War, I was drafted as a clerk in the Army Medical Corps at Fort Grant, Illinois. There I had but one consuming desire: to kill, not the enemy, but my drill sergeant. He was an unnecessarily brutal man, one of those latent sadists who get their kicks by exercising aggressive power over their fellow creatures. Of course, I now realize that such creeps are in truth nothing but insecure inadequates. After the war, I tried university again, this time the University of Chicago, where I took courses in biology, philosophy, and Spanish. But I maintained my earlier fine tradition by dropping out once more. Incidentally, that's a talent I share with Steinbeck, and going on yet another walking bummel. This time I went south to Georgia. I wanted to see the country, smell the ground, and look properly at the grasses, the birds, and the trees. I wanted truly to savor the place. And there was no other way to do that except on foot. People would ask me why I was walking, and at first I told them the truth, but they wouldn't believe me. So I stopped telling the truth and told them I was doing it for $100 bet. That worked. They could understand and believe that. On my long walk, I found that graveyard cemeteries are the best place to sleep if you want a quiet, undisturbed night. So whenever possible, I would happily hunker down in a convenient city of the dead. Stiffs in boxes 6 foot under don't snore. In 1921, third time lucky maybe, I went back to college, where I came under the tutelage of the man who was to be the most important influence on my life. He was the pioneer ecologist, Mr. Warder Clyde Orley. A most remarkable man. He was investigating animal aggregations. All animals, including humans, tend to cooperate in nature, instinctively moving towards aggregation or communal life. For example, the humble, brittle starfish intertwine their arms for security when gathered together under rocks. Dr. Orley led the way in ecological research. I studied his gospel diligently for 3 years, but I could not be bothered to jump through the hoop of graduating. Like Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, I considered exams a waste of time, valuable time that could be more usefully spent acquiring new information. Moreover, between ourselves, Venus was in the ascendant. I married my Nan, who gave me Ed Jr., the first of our 3 children a year later. Soon after that, the family moved here to Pacific Grove, where I established the Pacific Biological Laboratories on Fountain Avenue with my friend and fellow student from the University of Chicago, Alfred E. Gallagher. Now, in the first year of our activities, we caused a flurry in the Dovecot of respectable Pacific Grove. The nice folk there could not understand what Pacific Biological was up to. We were out and about at all hours of the night, driving through the town in a noisy old Mitchell. The upright and uptight Methodists of PG were convinced that we were bootleggers, what with all those bottles and gallon jars in our truck, and they reported us to the city police. An arresting Flatfoot crept up on us at the great tide pool where we were collecting some specimens in the wee small hours. "Freeze, you sons of female canines. What in hell do you think you're up to at this time of night?" We're collecting specimens, officer." "What's that?" "We preserve examples of marine life and send them to schools and colleges to help students in their studies." Fortunately, that satisfied him that we were not rum runners, but a couple of harmless, noisy academic lunatics. "Okay, but if you boys want to go play with the crabs and starfish in the moonlight, make sure you get that jalopy of yours seen to, and let the good folks of Pacific Grove get a decent night's sleep." So we patched up the muffler in the interest of public harmony. In 1928, Albert left the business, and I found myself the sole proprietor of Pacific Biological. Over the next 2 decades, I studied both the abundance and depletion of marine life in Monterey Bay. I monitored plankton levels. I experimented with distilling shark's liver oil for its medical properties. I recorded the effects of wave shocks and other physical factors that affected the ecological environment of Monterey Bay. And then along came Steinbeck. In 1930, there was a meeting of minds and impacted molars in Dr. Curry's dentist office on Lighthouse. John and his wife Carol had just moved into his family's cottage on Central Avenue. John and I took to one another at once, and for a time, Carol worked as lab assistant at Pacific Biological. Now, reporting back on the day's activities, either Carol exaggerated or more likely John later embroidered her accounts when he came to write that damn book of his. For example, the climax of Mac and the boys' frog hunting expedition. Mac, a character that John kidnapped, or rather bum-napped from local layabout legend Gay Bicknell, is speaking. "The surprise party we set up was just fine. We could just imagine Doc's face when he got back from the tide pools to find all them frogs waiting for him in a crate in the middle of the lab, and a big sign saying, 'Welcome home, Doc.' Yeah, well, trouble is we didn't wait for him to come back. That was the trouble. You see, Doc had some great jazz records, so we played while setting up for the party. They were real loud, the records, what with us nipping on old tennis shoes whiskey all the time for to get started. They heard us at the whorehouses across the way and decided that Doc had started a party and anyone was welcome. Well, that did it. It was them bums that started the fight. We broke the door in trying to shove them out, and sure enough, One of them bums crashed into the packing case and fell among the frogs. And then all hell broke out. Those damn frogs cut loose, hopping and plopping all over the lab, trooping out the door into the street. You couldn't step nowhere without stepping on and squelching the little vomits. Jeez, what a mess. And then the doc came back to his wrecked lab. What can you do? What can you say? I let him take a good swing at me. I deserved it. Maybe it'll teach me something, but I doubt it. Nah, it was a good fight. Doc wouldn't let us clear up, but I offered to pay for the damage, but of course he knew that would never happen. Doc said it helped a little to bust his knuckles on the side of my face. Guess it did. I guess it did. Well, thanks a lot, John. I never socked Gabe in the face. And to be fair, it's not a bad book. Steinbeck is a good friend. He was genuinely interested in marine biology, having taken classes earlier at the Hopkins Marine Station, where he was influenced by the teachings of William Emerson Ritter and his notion of the superorganism. Dr. Ritter believed that when creatures form a group, the group essentially becomes a separate entity from the individuals that compose it. John applied this biological theory for organisms in nature to the human race in what he called his phalanx theory. People working together can do great as well as bad things. The Joad family in The Grapes of Wrath better their appalling condition by their cooperation transcending their selfishness. If you will, the flies can conquer the wallpaper. And this helped me in 1932 when my marriage to Nan hit the rocks. And she took the 3 children away on the first of a series of separations that eventually became permanent. Don't agonize over the why. Just understand and accept the is. Meanwhile, I threw myself into a study of Jung and a survey of the Alaskan shoreline. Here I began to accumulate the materials for my book, Between Pacific Tides, which was to be a detailed account of the littoral according to ecological habitat. I intended my book to be accessible both to the serious scientist and the general reader, for let me tell you, biology and moral philosophy march to the same drum. If you would see a replica of man's social structure, you've only to examine the abundant and varied life of the tide pools, where miniature communal societies wage dubious battle against equally potent societies. Life started in the sea, and man is little more than a sophisticated brittle star. Indeed, that's probably what he evolved out of. Now, by 1936, I was living permanently at the lab, which was now situated at 800 Ocean View Avenue, the place they call Cannery Row. But in November of that year, disaster. An electrical fire started at the Del Mar Cannery next door. It spread and speedily engulfed the lab. I managed to rescue my car, painting, my typewriter, but everything else, my specimens, letter files, gramophone records, and most precious of all, my books, went up in smoke. Mercifully, the manuscript of Between Pacific Tides was at Stanford University Press at the time, but everything else was lost. Of course, I sued Pacific Gas and Electric for $12,000 in compensation, but not being in the position to hire a legal vulture, I only got $3,000. However, little by little, I picked up the charred pieces of my life. My friends, God bless them, rallied to me, giving me rehabilitation and book shower parties. And accordingly, this better, safer, and hopefully fireproof building was constructed. Now, I had hoped that royalties from my book would restore my fortunes, but Stanford University Press dragged their feet about the publication. They had originally been very reluctant to accept a non-university graduate's work, but they had acquiesced under pressure from Steinbeck, Stanford man himself, albeit a dropout like me, who was then one of the country's most celebrated, if controversial, authors. When they did finally get off their academic backsides and publish Between Pacific Tides, the interest of the nation was fixed on Mr. Hitler's invasion of Poland and the start of World War II in Europe. However, I'm pleased to say that the book continues to sell, so little by little, she's repaying her parents' lengthy labor pains. In 1940, Steinbeck and I embarked upon our exploration of the littoral of the Bahar Peninsula that was to be the genesis of our book, The Sea of Cortez. We hired a 67-foot fishing boat, the Western Flyer, and its crew. Carol Steinbeck came along as cook in an unsuccessful attempt to patch up their marriage. We set off in the spirit of Darwin's Beagle expedition, albeit our 6-week voyage was much, much shorter and considerably less controversial. Nevertheless, we too produced a book of at least equal literary, if not scientific, merit. We decided to let our book form itself. Its boundaries would be the boat and the sea. Its duration, 6 weeks. Its subject, everything we could see and think and even imagine. We wanted to show the interconnectedness of all things. The interconnectedness of man and his environment. All things are one thing, and one thing is all things. Plankton, that tiny shimmering phosphorescence on the sea, and the mighty spinning planets in the expanding universe are all bound together. In 1941, our book came out, but once again, the timing was hopeless. December 7 intervened, and the fate of the Pacific battle fleet in Pearl Harbor was the not-so-Pacific interest and focus of the nation. Our book foundered, just like the unfortunate Arizona. By that time, I was responsible for a new wife, or at least a common law wife, and her child. Upon my return from the Sea of Cortez expedition, I fell in love with an attractive divorcee, Toni Jackson. She and her small daughter, Kay, moved into the lab with me. When Yamamoto's torpedo and dive bombers hit Pearl, I was just by a few weeks still of age to be drafted into yet another war. So I became a medical technician once more, though this time in better circumstances at the Monterey Presidio and without a pain-in-the-butt drill sergeant. My somewhat less glamorous or glorious war work was checking blood and urine samples for traces of VD or Cupid's measles. Indeed, I did try to do more. On my own initiative, I submitted a report on the nature of the Pacific Palo Islands in Micronesia, gleaned from marine biologist research papers. Those islands would later prove to be of vital strategic value as bomber bases for our planes striking Japan. But Uncle Sam's military intelligence was more interested in my pisspot findings than the nature of tides and bottoms around the Palo Islands. I sometimes wonder what the Marines, whose landing craft grounded a quarter of a mile from the beach and had to wade ashore under enemy fire, thought of the quality of preparatory intelligence. Foobar, I wouldn't imagine. Civilization has gone plumb crazy mad. Countries should junk their military budgets and devote that money and thought and energy to fighting the common enemy of mankind, degenerative disease. Give money to public health, to psychiatry, and to improving human relations, I say. What a difference that would make to our human misery. With the advent of peace, I went to work for the California Packing Corporation. I was a scientist attached to them, conducting surveys of sardine population and its ever-increasing crisis. In my latest annual report for the Monterey Herald, I have stated, and I quote, "This year, with the sardine population perhaps at a record low, we have the greatest number of canning plants in the history of the industry, with a greater number of larger and more efficient fishing boats than ever before, scouring the ocean now with sonar devices. So we can answer the question, what has become of the fish, with the simple truth, they're all in cans." Loss and emptiness are everywhere. In October last, Tony's little daughter, Kay, died of a brain tumor, and a grieving Tony left me, eventually marrying and moving to Israel. Only when I had lost her did I realize how much I'd loved her. But isn't that always the way? I wrote Kay, "Yesterday I was so tired from no sleep, and I had a curious sadness of knowing that you were leaving with your husband for Palestine. I got that sadness of things that don't exist anymore, like when I used to talk with little Kay in her back room. I haven't had a chance to change it around as yet. All hopes can't become reality. Sometimes you just have to accept the is. But it still makes you very, very sad. Well, that's my story. And I hope that all you good folks, including the Steinbeck literary sensation seekers, will leave me now in peace. But let me leave you with this piece of advice that I give to kids at the lab. In life, we must do 3 things, and I will tell them to you in the order of importance. Number 1, and this is first in importance, we must have as much fun as we possibly can with what we have. Number 2, we must eat as much as we can, for if we don't, we won't have the energy to have as much fun as we can. And third, we must endeavor to clean the house, wash the dishes, etc. But this is the most important thing. We will not let the last 2 interfere with the first one. Moving into epilogue mode and reverting to myself. In 1947, Ricketts began a relationship with a 25-year-old Stanford student, Alice Campbell. Things were getting better for him. He was also preparing for a second large-scale marine expedition with Steinbeck, this time to the North Pacific littoral. But then, on an April dusk in 1948, he was driving his beat-up old Buick across the railroad tracks just above Cannery Row when it was struck by the Del Monte Express. He was pulled from the wreckage, stretchered, and rushed to the hospital, whose switchboard was jammed with people offering blood. The surgeons opened him up, then closed the incision. The next morning, groggy with ether and morphine, Ed asked the doctor, "How bad is it?" The doctor was going to say some soothing nonsense, but then remembered that Ed was his friend and that Ed loved the truth. So the doctor said, "It's very bad, Ed." John Steinbeck later wrote in his valedictory essay about Ed Ricketts, "Ed never asked again. He hung on for a couple of days because his vitality was very great. And then, as so often happens with men of large vitality, the energy and the color and the pulse and the breathing went away silently and quickly, and he died." Ed had once said, "Don't fight the tide, go with it." Later, sorting out Ed's effects in the lab, Steinbeck came across a safe to which there was no key. At some expense, he got a locksmith to crack the safe open. Inside was a bottle of Hague Scotch whiskey with a yellowed note, a veritable message from the dead. "What the hell did you expect to find here? Oh, well, here's a drink for your trouble." That was 90% proof. Ed Ricketts. Thank you very much. I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Right.
And
Any chats? Any chats?
And I'll check, yes, the chats. And if anyone wants to raise their hand, I'll look in the gallery, or if you click on the reactions tab, if you have the newer Zoom, you'll see where you can raise your hand. If you have an older version of Zoom, that will be when you click the participant symbol, and you'll see at the very bottom symbols across, and you'll see a blue Zoom hand. Or you're welcome to simply unmute yourself as well by using your microphone.
Okay.
Hello, Howard. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. That Rick. Hello, Rick.
Yes, Howard. Beautifully done once again. Thank you so much.
Bless you. Thank you very much for joining me. Okay.
I am wondering, unfortunately, we were out of touch and we missed the earlier ones in this series. Do you know if those are available for us to watch?
I don't believe they are, but maybe you can put pressure on the library and ask me to re-record them if they give me something for doing it. I'll do it at half price.
Thanks again. Thank you so much.
Okay, bless you. Bye, Rick. Bye. Any more for any more?
You see Nancy has their
Nancy-
hand up. And
Nancy,
then
yes, Nancy Soule, yes. Hello,
Yes.
Nancy.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
What do you think Ed Ricketts would think about the way Cannery Row has developed in the years since?
Well, I imagine he'd be horrified, I imagine, but it's only the way that the place survives. I mean, makes a lot of money for a lot of people. And at least there is he'd be very, I imagine, be impressed with the aquarium and the research that's done there. But the nicky-nacky tourist aspect of it, I think he'd like very much, and he wouldn't get much peace down there. So I think it'd be a mixed reaction, I imagine, that as everything in life is a mixture of good and bad, I guess. So there are good aspects of Cannery Row today.
Sure, thank you. And I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Whoa. That was a first. That's the first time I've actually seen a person asking me a question. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Bless you. Thank you. Anybody else? Right. Harriet to everyone. Harriet says, thank you. Have to leave. But yes, left with sadness at Ed Ricketts' passing. Thank you, Harriet. Well, she's probably gone to the dentist or something, so she told me. Right. Oh, Ellie Kincaid, fabulous program. As a past tide pool ranger on the Oregon coast, this talk brought back so many delightful memories. Between Pacific tides was our Bible. Thank you, Howard, Francesca, and the Monterey Library for this exceptional program. Well, that's very handsome, Ellie. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Any more for any more?
Howard, this is Andrea. Carol has her hand up.
Oh, right. And Andrea, who's got her hand up? Carol does she?
Yes, Carol has her hand up.
Carol Markin. They've got to try and find where Carol is and unmute her. Oh gosh.
I've asked her to unmute. So
Yeah,
it should
Carol, can you unmute yourself? Hit the little
Yes.
There you are.
Unmute.
unmute. Are
Can
you
you hear
there?
Can you hear me, Howard?
Yeah, I can hear you, Carol. I can hear you. Bless you. Yes, I can hear you.
Well,
Hello.
I was wondering if you did this, and I know you did this for the 250 birthday, wasn't that it? But now Steinbeck's birthday was celebrated down in Cannery Row and in different locations. I remember Susan Schillingsaw was running that. Do you do anything for the Steinbeck birthday?
Not as yet. They've sort of I've fallen underneath their radar. So maybe some people will tell them about me, and they'll.
Yeah, they have to do everything on Zoom. But the other thing I want to point out is this is a book that's got 1,015 pages, and it's on John Steinbeck.
Right.
And I asked if the library had it, and they said it's in the history room.
Oh,
And
right.
the history room is locked up. So they went and ordered this for me on Amazon. And they keep sending me notices saying, return it, we bought it for you. But I haven't returned it yet. I just want to apologize.
Right, there's a way to do it. Okay, way to do it. Bless you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Right. Ooh. Gosh.
Howard, I saw that Miss Knowles had her hand up earlier.
Oh, so right.
Yes.
Go ahead. Can you hear me? Do I have to unmute her, or is she going to unmute herself?
She's unmuted.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Okay.
This is Jose. The first question is in the very beginning. There's this. In the very beginning, it says John Ricketts in 1947. Is that the year he was killed in the traffic accident?
48.
48. A year later.
Yeah, a year later. 48.
But it was a very fine presentation, and I enjoyed from the very beginning to the end. And I got to know him much better about the Ricketts. The only thing I know is that when I went to the aquarium, there's one corner of the aquarium, there's a little part of the laboratory thing. That's the only thing I know.
That's right, yes.
But it was a great way to get to know this biologist. Thank you so much for the presentation, Howard.
Thank you, Constable. Bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Any more? Any more? I guess we're coming towards an end.
There are 3 people with their hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I can't sort of.
Oh, that's all right. So, Miss Allen, Barbara Allen, if you'd like to.
Oh, it's Barbara Allen. Oh, yes, I see. Yes, Rosemary Kennett, Barbara Allen. Okay.
Oh, I think I put the wrong emoji up.
Okay.
I wanted to clap and say how wonderful the program was. I enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara Allen. Thank you. Thank you. And Rosemary Kennett. What can I do? Ask to unmute. Okay. Rosemary, are you unmuted? Ooh.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Rosemary.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I very much enjoyed your presentation, and I've learned a lot from the library about Ed Ricketts and Steinbeck. And I came into this while having always been a fan of Steinbeck, but I landed up buying a house that belonged initially to James Fitzgerald, who I believe might have been the guy who painted the picture that Ricketts took out from the place during the fire.
Oh, right. How interesting. Gosh.
Yes. Yes. So I have been trying to track down a little bit about the relationship between Fitzgerald and Ricketts. I know both of them were interested in Eastern philosophy, and they shared, and Steinbeck also, and I know that Steinbeck and Fitzgerald had quite a few conversations. Haven't quite really figured out. He is sometimes assigned to be one of the Cannery Row people in the group, but I haven't figured out quite how often he would make it down to the lab. He lived up in the Monterey Hills, which is well over a good mile from the lab.
Yes, yes. Gosh.
But do you know anything about their relationship?
Unfortunately, I don't. And my excuse is that if you go on my website, howardburnham.com, you'll realize that I have about 140 characters that I do. And I'm sort of a jack of all characters and master of none. So you need to approach perhaps the people that run the
I have been talking to them as well. I just wondered.
And there is Susan Stillington, who's an authority on Steinbeck himself. But and actually, I must tell everybody that on Saturday I'm doing a program on the history of golf, as seen by old Tom Morris, the legend of St Andrews, which is a chance for me to do my Scottish accent. So so if anyone's interested in golf, you go to the Monterey County Theatre Alliance and sign up for that. So, okay. But,
well, thank you again for a very nice presentation.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And my last question is as a marine biologist, I wish Ricketts had discovered some specimen which must have been named nomenclature like Rickettia or something, but there's nothing.
Yes. I imagine there must be. I'm sure there must be, but
I hope there's
I don't know.
something after his name.
I'm
Yes.
sure they would know at the marine, the aquarium. The people there would know that. I'm pretty sure there must be some marine specimens named in his honor.
Yes, there should be. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Howard. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
So Howard, I just put in a plug for your next show. I've posted, this is Sandra McDonald, president of Monterey County Theater Alliance. I did have a follow-up question about Ricketts, but just quickly in the chat, I've put in the website where you can go and register for Howard's next show. But back to my question, is there any remnant of the actual Ricketts lab still in existence except what's in the aquarium?
Well, I guess they're the tanks at the back where he kept his specimens, the sort of concrete tanks at the back of the lab. That they are there, and there's the I suppose there are one or two little bits and pieces in the lab itself that possibly, or according to legend, did belong to him. It's about 4 or 5 years since I went on a tour of the lab, but I walk past it most days when I go along to Starbucks for a coffee.
If I can answer that question, Howard.
Please, thank you.
This is Bill Watkowski. I was the planning director with the city of Monterey when the city acquired the lab from the Mintz Group. And we are hoping to renovate the lab and keep the basement as it was and the upstairs room in that. But there are some of the specimens, bottles, and all that in the basement, in the garage area, that go back to that era. And Dennis Copeland, he no longer works for the city, but the city's museum director, and he was our archivist. He would know that specifically. And you can get in touch with him through the library director, Inga Waite. But yes, there are some, and we do hope to renovate it and bring it back to its previous life.
That's very exciting. Thank you. Thank you,
Howard.
Thank
Howard,
you.
it's Rick again.
Hi, Rick. Hello.
I just wanted, my favorite line, by the way, was the formaldehyde moment earlier.
Yes. Yes.
That was delightful.
Yes. Well, I'm afraid that's me. I don't think I can't quote him.
Well, absolutely. That's great. I did have a question. I don't know. I hope this isn't too delicate for some people, but I've always been very surprised that Doc Ricketts somehow managed to get himself killed in the way that he did. Was he perhaps, had he perhaps been drinking? I think he was somewhat well known for that, was he not?
Well, there's a possibility, but I think there was a sort of a building which masked the approach of the train, that there was a warehouse that was actually adjacent to the track, and maybe the car was going uphill at the time, making too much noise, and he didn't hear the train. But charitably, one says no, he wasn't drunk, but there's a distinct possibility, and I don't suppose they breathalyzed him in those days.
But if I could add one more comment to that.
Yes,
when
please.
we used to get together in the lab, they used to say, there's a serious question, why did he go out for beer or alcohol driving when across the street from the lab was Yaki's Grocery, which was supposedly been open 24 hours a day and had as much beer and wine as Doc and the boys could drink. So there's always that question, why did he go out driving to find alcohol when it was right across the street?
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Thank you. Thank you very much. There we go. There we go. Right. Well, I guess we've come up towards the hour. So just thank you all very much indeed for bearing with me. And did anybody notice that I made one boo-boo? I say, referring to the phalanx theory, the flies can conquer the wallpaper, and I should have said the flies can conquer the fly paper, which is what the line is. And one or two of the slides were slightly out of sync, but otherwise it wasn't a bad performance, I think. But thank you all very much for your company, and thank you, Francesca, for hosting it. And I look forward to appearing in a Scottish guise as Robert Louis Stevenson next month.
Yes.
Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you so very much, Howard. It was such a joy and pleasure to have you here. And we definitely look forward February 11th, Thursday at 2 p.m. It'll be the same here. I also just, one brief note is I included a link to a virtual tour of the lab that was recently led by Susan Schilling-Law. So if you'd like to learn more, you can go ahead and click in the chat box, or you'll also find that on the Monterey Public Library's YouTube channel.
Right.
This recording will also be available on the YouTube channel as well. So thank you again to everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Howard. We wish you a wonderful afternoon. Remember that the library is here for you. We have many resources. Call us, let us know how we can help you get through this time.
Right.